with great distinction from the University of California at Berkeley. She is the author of several articles questioning the Jewish circumcision ritual, Brit Milah, for Jewish publications, including the September-October 1990 issue of Tikkun. Her questioning into her own religion and these issues has been, I think, very important for both the Jewish community and the secular community, and I appreciate her work. And please help me to welcome Lisa Braver-Moss.
Thank you. I think I'll wait until people have begun to sit down. Well, I was going to begin by reading selected passages from Genesis chapter 17. Can you hear me okay?
Not well enough.
Not well enough? This is better? This?
Yeah.
Okay.
Make sure your thumb isn't over the little, that's
Okay.
the video.
Okay. Anyway, I was going to start by reading selected passages from Genesis 17, and Dr. LaRue read some of it, but I thought I would read it again and really give you a full flavor. It's a little long, but I want you to get the full flavor of it. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk in my ways and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous. And you shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. And I make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile and make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you. I will maintain my covenant between me and you, to be God to you and your offspring to come. I assign the land you sojourn in to you and your offspring to come, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting holding. I will be their God. God further said to Abraham, As for you, you and your offspring to come throughout the ages shall keep my covenant. Such shall be the covenant between me and you and your offspring to follow, which you shall keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And throughout the generations, every male among you shall be circumcised at the age of 8 days. Thus shall my covenant be marked in your flesh as an everlasting pact. And if any male who is uncircumcised fails to circumcise the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his kin. He has broken my covenant. I am a Jew, and I question circumcision. I have been questioning circumcision ever since I learned of the rite as a girl. At that time, I questioned circumcision because it seemed wrong to cause pain to infants, and because it seemed strange to surgically alter a healthy, God-given part of the body. As I grew into adulthood, I added questions. I continue to add them. I question circumcision because of its risks. I question it because it is seen by many as a perfunctory act rather than a spiritual one. I question it because it seems to require parents to take advantage of their infants' dependence and weakness. And I question it because of the paradox that those who support infant circumcision often cringe at the idea of circumcision of an older child as a puberty rite. I'm sure all of these concerns are familiar to you as health professionals who also question circumcision. I've spent the last several years exploring the topic of circumcision as a writer and as a Jew. I have 2 circumcised sons, ages 5 and 2. I've written a couple of articles on Brit Milah, or the Covenant of Circumcision, for Jewish magazines. The first was published in Tikkun magazine in September of last year, and my other one will appear later this year in Midstream magazine. My inquiry into Brit Milah has convinced me that every one of my concerns about the rite is rooted not just in my own personal worldview, but in Judaism itself. Let's go back to the concerns I mentioned, starting with pain. According to Jewish law, it is forbidden to cause tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, or pain of living things. Even the necessary causing of pain is considered cruel in Judaism. And Jewish law even prohibits the pairing up of a small and a large animal for plowing in case the asymmetry causes the littler one discomfort. Clearly, concern over the pain of others has strong Judaic roots. What about the concern that circumcision involves the surgical alteration of a perfectly natural, God-given part of the body? This concern, too, stems from Jewish thought. We Westerners generally find the bodily mutilation practiced in other cultures to be deeply distasteful. This distaste is based on the Hebrew Bible's denouncement of pagan practices such as tattooing and cutting the flesh. Then there's the risk of serious complications and even death from circumcision. No matter how small these risks are, they must be considered. Now, even this concern is an echo of Jewish law. Judaism regards life as infinitely sacred and gives it precedence over all else. Accordingly, Jewish law tells us that any medical procedure involving even the possibility of risk to life must be viewed as dangerous and is therefore strictly forbidden. Thus, the risk of circumcision is not just a medical concern, but a Jewish one. My concern that many see Brit Milah as a perfunctory act rather than a spiritual one is also a Jewish concern. This is a thorny point of Jewish law, but I will try to summarize the issues for you. Judaism stresses deeds more than faith. So, according to Jewish law, one should perform the commandments, of which circumcision is one, even if the act does not reflect one's spiritual beliefs. And yet, there is also a Jewish law requiring that we perform every commandment with our whole heart, with spiritual intent or kavanah. So, although Jewish law supports circumcision even when it is done without a broader commitment to Judaism or God, there is also Jewish reason to find it unsettling when this happens. I also mentioned my concern that circumcision requires parents to take advantage of their infant's helplessness. Even this concept, that we have a moral obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves, is, you guessed it, a Jewish concept. Additionally, the idea of treating others as you yourself would like to be treated is a Jewish one. According to Jewish lore, the legendary Rabbi Hillel was once asked to summarize Judaism while standing on one leg. Hillel replied, "What is hateful to you, do not to your fellow creature." Finally, a slightly more esoteric concern. I question infant circumcision because it seems to me that a person's age should not affect our attitude towards his suffering. In other words, if we find the circumcision of older children offensive, it seems to me we should find infant circumcision equally offensive. I believe the single most significant reason we continue to practice infant circumcision, both medically and ritually, is that we don't respond to the suffering of infants in the same way we respond to the suffering of older children and adults. As parents, our connection with our newborns is a very tenuous one, however strong it may feel when we first hold our little one and look into his or her eyes. The tenuousness of the bond only becomes apparent when we compare it to our bond with our older children. I, for one, could not subject my 5-year-old or my 2-year-old to circumcision for any reason other than absolute life or death necessity. Now, I'm not saying it was easy for me to do it at their birth, only that it would be impossible now. It is precisely this phenomenon that advocates of routine neonatal circumcision are articulating when they advise parents to get it over with now, because if you wait until your baby gets older, you will never want to do it. There's a way in which our infants are strangers to us when compared with our older children. Now, how would Judaism view this premise? If we do think of our infants as strangers on some level, and if our treatment of them is less humane because of it, Judaism disapproves. The commandment to love the stranger and not to oppress him appears not once but 36 times in the Torah. As some of you probably know, the Torah is the written text that's the foundation of all Jewish law and thought. So if we ask whether it is ethical to subject an infant to Brit Milah when we would not subject an older child to the same ritual, we are asking a Jewish question. So, to sum up, all of the concerns I have outlined here, pain, surgical alteration of the body, medical risk, lack of spiritual conviction, taking advantage of helplessness, and, so to speak, oppressing the stranger, stem from Jewish concepts. Now, this does not mean, and I want to be very clear here, that circumcision is an un-Jewish thing to do. Whether or not it conflicts with other Jewish principles, circumcision is still considered a quintessentially Jewish act, a symbol of the covenant between God and the Jewish people, and a primary emblem of Jewish identity. The point is, concerns about circumcision are also Jewish. Thus, a decision not to circumcise an infant, but to observe the covenant through a symbolic ceremony instead of a traditional one, can also be a Jewish decision. And I'm sure you'll hear more about this from Moshe Rothenberg, who's going to present next. Thousands of Jews today are questioning circumcision and deciding not to circumcise their infant sons. By my estimates, American rabbis are getting at least 3,000 calls every year from parents who are in conflict about the rite. And by the way, I can explain how I arrived at this estimate during the question and answer period if anyone is interested. The parents who contact rabbis because they find Brit Milah problematic are often requesting symbolic ceremonies as an alternative to traditional Brit Milah. They believe the covenant need not be established through a literal biblical interpretation, and they voice concerns about circumcision that invariably stem from Jewish thinking. In addition to those parents who contact rabbis about their conflict, thousands more are making the decision not to circumcise without contacting a rabbi. So circumcision is a Jewish concern of some magnitude. Now, rabbis are already performing symbolic covenant ceremonies for baby girls. While some rabbis are willing to perform such ceremonies for boys, these rabbis are still few and far between and prefer to remain anonymous. There is a grassroots Jewish group that distributes texts for symbolic ceremonies and provides support for parents questioning Brit Milah. However, the questioning parents are still having to forfeit a rabbi-officiated ceremony because of their convictions. I am hoping that more rabbis will begin to offer symbolic ceremonies to boys as well as to girls, and I will talk more later about how this might happen. I'd like to talk about how I arrived at the ideas I've summarized here, because my research process has been quite an adventure. The early drafts of my writing about circumcision, before I had done much Jewish research, were very vehemently anti-circumcision. Underneath my vehemence was an intense feeling of guilt about agreeing to have my own son circumcised, even though I had always found circumcision disturbing. My purpose in writing these early drafts was to shake people into thinking. If they got angry in the process, I figured it was a sign of their irrationality. But gradually, I started wanting to talk about my feelings in a way that would open people's minds rather than closing them. Gradually, I started looking to Judaism to deepen my inquiry. And gradually, from within this inquiry, I began to come to terms with my own experience of the rite. I began going to Jewish studies classes at my synagogue, reading about Judaism, and pursuing various research paths about circumcision at the Jewish Community Library. I ran my new ideas past the rabbis at my synagogue and from other branches of Judaism to make sure my perceptions of Jewish law and history were sound. So began a dialogue between rabbis and myself. My older son was attending the nursery school at my synagogue, and I needed feedback from Jewish peers about the articles I was writing, so I began bouncing new ideas off my fellow parents at the nursery school as well. Many people in my life were surprised at my desire to question circumcision in a Jewish context. Yet everyone with whom I have discussed my thoughts has been incredibly helpful in one way or another. And some of my friends and family and volunteer manuscript editors are in fact sitting here today. I appreciate their being here. Those who disagreed with me the most vehemently sometimes offered me the best insights and were sometimes the most gentle on my writer's ego. And those who thought I was onto something were occasionally my harshest critics. But in the process of sharing my ideas, seeking feedback, and refining my writings in a Jewish context, something unexpected began to happen. I began to feel connected as a Jew in a way I never had before. I began to experience for the first time in my life a sense of Jewish community. I found myself signing up to study Hebrew and learning the Sabbath blessings and prayers and preparing for my adult bat mitzvah ceremony, which was held last June. I found myself celebrating the Sabbath and attending services and sharing what I was learning of Judaism with my boys. I was getting a Jewish education for the first time, and I continue to pursue my interest in Judaism. I take my own Jewish heritage much more seriously now than I did before I began this inquiry. So far, I have talked about the Jewish roots of current concerns about circumcision, and I have shared with you how my inquiry about this topic has strengthened my own Jewish identity and sense of community. The next question is, how can you as health professionals respond to the needs of Jewish clients about the issue of circumcision? Now, I'm sure all of you recognize how important it is to be sensitive and respectful. Yet, from outside Judaism, it may be tempting to view the issue as a black and white question of human rights. To Jews, it remains highly complex. What's a health professional to do? First of all, I would strongly discourage any health professional from attempting a Jewish discussion of circumcision unless you are Jewish yourself and/or deeply committed to studying the topic in depth beforehand. I feel it is nearly impossible to understand from the outside the complexities of this ritual and the pressures on Jewish parents regarding circumcision. This goes even for those who are largely non-observant and even for those who openly question circumcision. Sometimes, out of respect for Judaism, you will need to refrain from speaking your mind about a topic you feel strongly about. Of course, if Jewish parents want access to medical information regarding circumcision, it is your job to provide it. And if you feel circumcision is wrong medically, in my opinion, you have an obligation to say so. But although I have shared some of my Jewish inquiry about Brit Milah with you here today, I would not, as I said, recommend you're engaging in a Jewish dialogue with your clients unless you are Jewish and the topic interests you from a Judaic point of view. This dialogue is a Jewish one. I have shared it with you to demonstrate that the questions are all right there in Judaism itself. I believe the answers lie there too. How might you handle Jewish clients who have decided to circumcise their infant for religious reasons? I would urge you not to get involved in this decision, either explicitly or by showing tacit disapproval, with one exception. If the clients can't decide whether to do the circumcision in the hospital without ceremony or on the 8th day with ceremony, I feel they should be encouraged to do the latter. Technically, a hospital circumcision without ceremony is not recognized as a Jewish circumcision. But beyond this technicality, as long as the parents have decided to circumcise their son because they are Jewish, a religious ceremony makes infinitely more sense than a sterile hospital circumcision. How might you approach Jewish clients who express concerns about circumcision? This, too, requires the utmost insensitivity. Encourage your clients to include rabbis and even moels, or ritual circumcisers, in their thoughts about the topic. How will Jewish leaders become aware of the scope of Jewish concern about circumcision unless they are consulted by parents? Your clients can call a rabbi and make an appointment to talk just as they would make an appointment to interview a pediatrician. They do not have to belong to a congregation to do so. Now, I'm not suggesting that Jewish parents will all have the time or inclination to turn their concern about Brit Milah into a major Jewish inquiry, but they can accomplish a lot by making their conflicts known to Jewish leaders, family, and peers. Beyond this, in helping create a Jewish dialogue about circumcision, they deepen their sense of their own Jewishness and give of themselves to Judaism. Many Jews questioning circumcision will assume that their questions will not be well received by mainstream Judaism. Unfortunately, Jewish leaders often reinforce this assumption by glossing over the concerns that parents raise about Brit Milah and trying to coax them into a traditional view of the rite. But this may be changing a little. The liberal branch of Judaism known as the Reform Movement has in recent years set up its own Brit Milah board and has instituted a program to certify physicians as Reform Moels. Unlike Orthodox Moels, these Reform Moels, being physicians, can administer local anesthesia and provide medical expertise, which some parents want. Of course, the certifying board, it's called the Brit Milah Board of Reform Judaism, believes strongly in a traditional interpretation of Brit Milah. Yet they are beginning to include alternate viewpoints as part of their training class so that Moels can be sensitive to parents' conflicts about the rite. Just a week and a half ago, I gave a presentation at the local training class in which I discussed the need for covenantal ceremonies that do not include circumcision and proposed that a Moel should not downplay parents' concerns or talk parents into a traditional interpretation if they express doubts about it. I have been invited to submit a chapter discussing my views for the next edition of the textbook for the training course. Reform Judaism certainly does not endorse a non-traditional view of Brit Milah, yet its Brit Milah board has demonstrated a commitment to Jewish dialogue about the rite that includes non-traditional thinking. One final point about Jewish parents questioning circumcision. Some are limiting the scope of their inquiry by seeking only secular ammunition against circumcision, for example, medical arguments. But by restricting their inquiry in this way, they are fostering the illusion that circumcision cannot be questioned from a Jewish point of view. It seems to me that this amounts to a form of protection or indulgence of Judaism, as if Judaism were a fragile relic, unable to function in light of new information and insights. This is not an accurate picture of contemporary Judaism. Its beauty is precisely its ability to reckon with changes in understanding. Judaism is, as Rabbi Milton Steinberg put it, an organism. Certainly, tradition keeps Judaism alive, but so do inquiry, dialogue, and well-thought-out change. I'd like to take a few minutes before closing to read from the Jewish prayer book, Gates of Prayer. I find this poem to be an incredibly beautiful illustration of Judaism's love of inquiry. This is a meditation called Doubt. Cherish your doubts, for doubt is the handmaiden of truth. Doubt is the key to the door of knowledge. It is the servant of discovery. A belief which may not be questioned binds us to error, for there is incompleteness and imperfection in every belief. Doubt is the touchstone of truth. It is an acid which eats away the false. Let none fear for the truth, that doubt may consume it, for doubt is a testing of belief. For truth, if it be truth, arises from each testing stronger, more secure. Those who would silence doubt are filled with fear. The house of their spirit is built on shifting sands. But they that fear not doubt and know its use are founded on a rock. They shall walk in the light of growing knowledge. The work of their hands shall endure. Therefore, let us not fear doubt, but let us rejoice in its help. It is to the wise as a staff to the blind. Doubt is the handmaiden of truth. I would like to see a time when Jewish parents will be able to express their doubts about Brit Milah openly within the Jewish community. And I would like Jewish parents to have the choice between observing Brit Milah traditionally or bringing their son into the covenant symbolically in a ceremony officiated by a rabbi. This will only come about from within Judaism when Jewish parents' concerns about circumcision are recognized as Jewish concerns. Whether your Jewish clients have made a decision to circumcise their son, have some conflicts about it, or have decided categorically against it, they should be encouraged to participate in a dialogue within the Jewish community. Judaism needs their voices. Thank you very much.
Lisa, two very quick questions. One, if you had another son, would you circumcise him?
Where's my husband? I told him this question. I told you. Well, what is it going to be, honey? That's really a question that I would need to be answered in the context of my marriage, and I can't answer it for you now. It's something that
could you give me just a gut level, knowing what you know, and the writing that you've done, just hypothetically, knowing what you know, would you?
If I were to become pregnant again, I would have a girl. Definitely have a girl. So I'm sorry. I just need some privacy on this.
I understand. I'm curious. Second question is, what is your advice to Jewish healthcare professionals, mainly doctors, who may have very strong traditional reasons for being pro-circumcision when he or she encounters a patient or parents who are opposed to circumcision?
Okay, if a Jewish physician who has pro-circumcision feelings encounters a client that has doubts about it, that is simply opposed.
Opposed to circumcision.
I mean, I think that health profession, I think what I've said really goes for that too. I think that the health professional should encourage the person to really engage with rabbis and other fellow Jews about this dialogue. I mean, have a dialogue. I don't think that it's a tricky question though, isn't it? It's a tricky question because the physician is going to have certain cultural reasons as well as medical ones.
If it's a non-Jewish family, if he is a Jew.
Oh, well, I mean, if it's a non-Jewish family, Well, they should get a second opinion. I mean, they shouldn't have to do that.
I appreciate your truth-seeking abilities here, everybody here. The issue that I have here is, I think, first of all, if we can set aside everything and focus on one issue, and that is that I believe, and I think there are many of us here that believe, and actually there's a difference between believing and knowing. Actually, I should change that to I know that every human being has the right to an intact body. I think that every person should have the ability to decide whether they want to be Jew, Christian, or whatever. It doesn't matter. And an 8-year-old baby boy is not in the capability to make any of those decisions, nor is a 12-year-old boy, and I think probably 18 years old might be a fairly decent area for that person to make a decision. The other thing that I want to bring up is that I don't think there's a person in this room that hasn't ever been lied to. If there is, I'd like to see a hand if someone has. I think what we're dealing with is the issue of the fact that over the period of history that we have all been lied to. And I think what happens is one lie is passed on to another generation, and that generation passes it to another, and over a period of years and centuries and so forth, the lies become truth.
So
Or they
you're
appear to
concerned.
become truth.
You're concerned about this from a human rights point of view. You're saying that.
I'm concerned with the fact that I'm not saying that you have been lied to, because I'm not a judge. I'm not someone that can. I think that every human being is given the ability to seek and to find the truth on any issue. It doesn't matter if it's circumcision or whatever. And I think that you're a good example of it because of the fact that you have had so much questioning in your mind about this subject. And I think that what that is displaying is your truth-seeking abilities. And you are truly seeking the truth about this. And the reason that you feel uncomfortable about it, and the reason that many people feel uncomfortable about it, is because I believe that it is a lie. And I believe that what we're doing is exposing a lie that is why the media doesn't want us to expose this.
Well, some of the media is here. Actually, I think that you need to kind of break this down if you have a specific question. If I could just sort of answer what I think you're saying is that this is a human rights question that applies to Jews as well as non-Jews. And so you're saying, why should we sort of indulge the ritual? Isn't that what you're saying?
I'm basically saying that we all have a right to an intact body, and that's basically...
But that's not something that, I mean, the question is, if you want to have that recognized, then how do you get the job done? I mean, how do you accomplish that, given the fact that this is such a thorny and complex issue, and you have to sort of respect the tradition that it's from. It's because it's a tradition that in turn respects inquiry and change. I think you have to really think about what you can change and what you can do. Now, you're not Jewish, yes? You're not? Or
No, I'm not.
You're not Jewish. So what you can do is raise consciousness about this among people who are not interested in it religiously. I mean, you probably can get more done sort of a little bit at a time if that's your goal, than to try to take on something this enormous that's not going to change overnight simply because you think, oh, it's irrational and wrong and all of those things, which you have reason to feel. But I guess it's a question of how to...
Well, it is a religious issue on this particular topic.
Right.
And for me to believe, or for someone to pass a bill of goods on to me, to believe that my God, the Creator, would create my body in such a perfect way that everything is right except one part, and that is the most sensitive part of my body, needs to be fixed by crushing and amputating it,
Well, I think you can, yeah.
My mind is not able to understand any rational,
Well, I think you need to accept, let me just respond to one thing. You need to accept the fact that it's irrational. It's really a matter of respecting that. Okay, go ahead, next.
When I used to live in Washington State a few years ago, there was some legal investigation and eventually prosecution and extensive public disapproval over a local American Indian rite in which a young child was sustained human bites along her side as part of this Indian ritual. The verdict eventually was that this was child abuse and that no one has the right to inflict physical harm on another person, especially a child, as part of a religious ritual. Did non-Indians lack that right to investigate this? Perhaps this Indian biting ritual meant just as much to them as your
Right. I understand. I think you have to accept the fact that circumcision is going to happen. And given that...
Indian biting is going to happen.
Let me just finish, okay? You need to accept the fact that this is a ritual that has gone on for 3,000 or 4,000 years at least, I mean among Jewish people, and that it is going to happen. And as long as it is going to happen, it becomes a concern to me to have a sort of police state or to have it become unconstitutional, to have these things being done, in back rooms on kitchen tables, so to speak. It's a very thorny thing. There's not a thing with simple answers. I mean, I see your point, but it's, you don't want the baggage that goes along with that level of, you don't want the baggage that goes along with a legal decision, for example, against circumcision, period.
So did us as non-Indians not have the right to question the Indians?
No, I didn't say you don't have a right. I'm saying that it's probably ineffective. No, it's probably ineffective, and it probably is something that, I mean, I don't know very much, I don't know anything about that right except what you've just told me, but it's a question of putting your efforts where they really can be best, how to get the job done, essentially.
So Indians are lower status, we can question their...
Excuse me, I did not say that.
Okay, I'm looking for consistency in this.
I gave you consistency. Why don't we take the next question?
I think we have a catch-22 here. If you're not Jewish and you have some criticism, then you're anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. If you're Jewish, then you have internalized oppression and you have self-hatred if you criticize. So you can't win either way. Now, you talked about...
I mean, I don't consider it anti-Semitic to question circumcision, obviously, since I'm a very involved Jew, I guess. I'm very involved in questioning it as a Jew. I mean...
Well, the way you question it doesn't sound like questioning to me, because all the study you've done, you haven't come up with any conclusions. You don't even know what you'd do if he has another son. Now, the prohibition against Cain in Jewish law, first off, the law does not apply to non-Jews. So if a non-Jew is drowning, according to the Talmud, the Jew does not have responsibility to save them because they're not Jewish. The other thing is, I feel that dogma in the Jewish religion and other religions also denies reality. So if we look at ritual slaughter, the Jewish explanation of that says that the way that the ritual slaughterer does it very quickly with a very sharp knife gives the least amount of pain to the animal. That's a lie. And I think this...
let me just ask you this, because there's a lot of people lining up to ask questions. What would you think would be an appropriate solution to the conflicts that I've sort of outlined? If you feel that I haven't come up with a solution that makes any kind of impact.
The first questioner's attitude, truth-seeking, is the essential thing that we need to do. If we do that work well, then we will come up with an answer to the question.
Well, like what? I mean, what are you proposing exactly?
To look at circumcision for what it is, the actual...
But people aren't going to look at it for what you say it is. That's a reality. That's simply a matter of reality.
And the after effects, and judge from those,
I mean,
those facts what should be done with it.
Okay. Let me know if you come up with any other ideas.
We have 4 minutes left, and I'm willing to go over for 5 minutes. It'll take us 10 minutes since for lunch, and if everybody agrees that, because it is interesting. We need to get these issues addressed. Please keep it quick and...
I'll try to move on too.
Okay, you've been great.
I'm going to ask my question to you, sister to sister, and invite you for a moment to get grounded in a woman's experience of yourself. And my question flows out of this. I'm a midwife, so I have to be with women and draw out their natural knowing of unity, of oneness. My midwife ears perked up when I heard amongst your criteria that the child that you're carrying, the seed, the fruits of the loving in the covenant with your husband in marriage, that we carry the softest tissues of ourselves, you call a stranger. I would invite you to look, perhaps, to revision that and to see to what extent you are estranged from what is the unity of you and your baby in full knowingness.
Well, surely you can't be telling me that my experience is wrong or something, right? I mean, you're not trying to tell me that what I've experienced is not true, are you?
Of course.
It's true for me. It's true for me that when my babies came out, I was not as bonded with them as I became bonded over time. And I would think that it's true. I mean, I don't know who else it's true of, but I really think, I mean, my point is just that the bond grows over time, and that there's a way in which this takes advantage of the strangeness of a newborn child. I mean, the fact that you're not really bonded with it yet, and all this hoo-ha about instant bonding. I personally did not experience. I'm very bonded with my children now. I've bonded with them over time, but I think some of that is just empty rhetoric. That's what I think.
No, I'm excited to hear that, because you are in for a most wonderful experience when you carry your third baby. And I invite you to come to my presentation tonight about how circumcision affects women's sexuality. Please be there.
Thank you.
First, I want to say I think you're doing a wonderful mitzvah here.
Thank you.
One little criticism. I think you missed one connection. You say there are indeed grassroots groups that are
There is one.
addressing this, offering the bris shalom, that is the symbolic bris. And you say that there's very little that Gentile practitioners can do.
No, I think it would be a huge thing. If they would do what I'm proposing, I think it would be huge.
One thing I didn't hear is one thing they can do is to refer their patients, their clients,
To
Jewish organizations, to groups of Jews who are addressing the issue.
That's
So
true.
admit,
That's a good
well,
point.
I'm a Gentile, I can't address this issue, but here's a group that can.
Right.
Can you offer here addresses or phone numbers?
Yes, I
so
have-
People
I-
here can make that referral.
I do have an address for the Alternative Grit Support Group, which will send information. Let me make this clear. It will send information to parents questioning this and making the decision not to do it. This group will not send information to physicians and midwives who want to sort of just distribute it. They want it to be directly between them and the Jewish couple who's struggling with this. So I have the address, and people can write. People can have their clients, I should say, write to them. Should I just announce that now? Why don't I do that? It's called, does anyone want that? And just grab a pen. It's called the Alternative Brit Support Group, and the PO box is 14703 in Fremont, California, 94539.
Two quick givens before my question. The one given being that in the 1990s there is more awareness of one's right to one's body in one piece. The second given being that you seem to indicate there is some thought or direction towards symbolic, meaning not do it with a knife, towards actual circumcision within your religion. Would you envision, is it possible within your religion to promote the decision of the circumcision till the baby boy is old enough, say late teens, to think for himself, to say, yes, I want this done actually, or...
Right. I think I think it's an interesting question. I mean, I think...
I would prefer to have this done symbolically and keep my body in heck.
Right.
Is that
No,
possible?
I think it would probably be dismissed as a kind of a rhetorical proposition. I mean, I think it's interesting, though, because by Jewish law, the punishment for non-circumcision is called karet, and it means to be cut off from your people. And it does not apply to a baby who's uncircumcised. It only applies, according to Jewish law, at age 13. So, I mean, there is some, I think there's some thinking about it being something a boy becomes responsible for at 13 if it hasn't been done. However, I think it would be, you know, I think it would be seen as as I said, as a rhetorical suggestion. I mean, don't you?
I feel it's a valid suggestion.
It is a valid, but I'm saying I think it would be seen as.
I'm asking whether it would fit within your religion.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
I'm Jewish, and I wanted to first of all tell you that I don't like the idea of the ritual. I don't think that's preferable, because as much resentment as I have about being circumcised, I have that much more resentment that at the height of my humiliation and at this assault, that my friends and family were having a party in that environment. So I have even more resentment about the fact that
You need to tell everybody that. Not everybody here, but everybody in the Jewish community. You need to tell them that.
I do that.
Good.
And, I also think that it can be outlawed, even though it's been done for thousands of years.
It can be outlawed? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that is preferable to bringing it out in the open, just as animal sacrifice has been done for thousands of years in religious settings, and polygamy has been done for thousands of years. And our American solution, the legal solution, is not to bring it out in the open and sanction it, but to outlaw it, and I think that's effective.
You don't think that would be a little, you don't think there would be backlash from that? I mean, I think, see, I'm totally against that. I think I'm against bloodshed, and I feel like there should be a choice that Jewish parents have of not inflicting this on their kids. But I honestly believe there would be more bloodshed if this were illegalized than all the circumcisions ever put together, and I'm against it.
Well, I disagree. I think most Jews are law-abiding people. But the other thing is that I think there are other solutions, and as you're saying, it's a personal decision. You know, there's no right or wrong. It's questionable. People should be making up their own minds. And I think once you're giving it that leeway, then you have to accept that it's the personal decision is not the personal decision of the parents.
Wait,
it's
the reality,
it's my personal
right?
decision.
That's right. I understand, but the reality, yeah.
Things. You know, during the Passover Seder, we drink salt water to symbolize tears. We don't drink tears. We don't eat bricks.
Well, that's why I think it would be really great to have some symbolic ceremonies being performed by rabbis in recognition of the fact that this can be a symbolic covenant. That's what I'm hoping for.
I really
That's what I'm
support that and tell parents that it's the child's body, it's his decision.
Okay, that's all we have time. All right. No, I'm sorry, we just don't have time. These questions can be answered after Moshe speaks, and that means that people who want to leave for lunch can do that, and others who want to stay and engage themselves in this, it'd be wonderful. So, no, please, no late questions, I'm sorry. Thank you, Lisa. You can see what courage it takes for her to question as well. Our next speaker, Moshe.